let's go straight into sustainable tourism means industry reorganization. And to moderate that session and introduce the panel, can I welcome Yolanda Perdomo, Global Tourism Strategist, ICF. Yolanda.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Yesterday, at the opening, Christian Delon, which is the Secretary General of the World for Travel, mentioned the word revolution. And I think that's quite interesting. And the question I'm posing right now to begin this panel is, are we facing a revolution? And if so, is sustainability a trigger? And to answer this question, we will answer this question with the help of Nikolina Angelkova, which is a member of the Bulgarian Parliament and the former Minister of Tourism in Bulgaria from 2014 and 2020. Thank you so much. Then I would like to invite Holly Budge, who is the founder of How Many Elephants, and Frank Gervais, which is the CEO of the Groupe, Pierre et Vacances. And then there are two persons who will join us remote. First is Gregory Lanter, the Chief Development and Construction Officer of Club Med. Bonjour, Gregory. And Liz Ortiguera, which is the CEO of the Pacific Asia Travel Association, PATA. Thank you to every one of you. So, just to introduce the topic, when we talk about industry reorganization, I think we have to be very specific. If not, we risk losing the focus. So I think there are three elements here we should analyze. And these elements are at three different levels too. First is products and services, and as a result, human resources. Is that going to change or not? And if so, how? Second, the business model and the positioning approach, because that's a consequence of changing also the product and the products and the services. And third, the stakeholder involvement, the alignment, the stakeholder alignment, and the governance model, which is something that at the end is something we have been discussing here since yesterday. So I'm gonna pose the first question to all of you. It's going to be the same question because all of you offer a different perspective, and I think we will be able to have quite a good idea at the end of your interventions of what is happening right now. So the first question is, most sectors will require an adjustment of products and services. Is this your case? And what will this imply in terms of model and positioning approach? So I'm going to start with Nikolina. From your perspective at Parliament and having been a tourism minister and being involved in legislation and on the broad picture in tourism, do you perceive a change here in products and services? Is this going to imply a change also in the model?
Thank you, Yolanda, for this question. Yes, definitely. As we all are talking since yesterday here, tourism is very much impacted with COVID-19 pandemic. And tourism is about people and for people. And definitely product we offer is connected with human resources. Because the robotization is good, but imagine if you have to be welcomed by a robot. I mean, that's in tourism is not going to offer a good quality. So keeping human resources and people that work in the sector is crucial. And in Bulgaria, when the pandemic started, first thing we did, and we continue, is to support companies in tourism sector with financial grants to be able to keep their personnel. Because what we are noticing currently is that most of the people, but the one that have one, according to me, of the main positions, like waiters, maids, like doorbell, I mean, actually the people that are welcoming us as visitors, they are really requalified due to the fact that thanks to the pandemic, tourism sector became uncertain and they don't know how long they will work or how long the duration of their contract will be. And now, in particular in the summer, when we were open and we have started to welcome a lot of tourists, one of the main problems of the industry was really to find qualified people to work on certain positions, as it was in 2019. So here, the training is crucial. The support of the government is also very important and has to continue until at least year 24, until, according to me, tourism will reach some of the levels in 2019. Because, as I said and repeat, tourism is about people. And this, of course, will lead to a change of the product offered. It is now important, and tourists are becoming much more demanding as regard quality of additional services offered in terms of visiting different places, like from cultural and historical perspective, trying having the food experience in the country, traditions, and this will require the reorganization of the tourism product and model offered to the market in terms to close the cycle of that. I mean, each company should pay a huge attention how the personnel on one side is kept and trained to be able to offer qualified services. On the other side, what are the tourist expectations once they come in the country and what they exactly want to experience? Because what was before 2019, yesterday we discussed that most of the governments were thinking that tourism sector and tourism generally is going by its own. But now, this pandemic shows that actually the tourism sector needs to be supported, needs common efforts. And this is not just an effort of the tourism sector itself. It should be in line with the national policy. It should be in line with the policy of the local authorities. It should be in line with the policy of the NGOs that are protecting and proclaiming the sustainability of tourism, which is number one. I mean, now more and more people want to be in touch with the nature and the natural resources offered in each and every country. So definitely COVID-19 pandemic is giving the opportunity to reorganize that and to come out of that pandemic stronger, united, with higher quality and personnel to work for. And this for me is really crucial to be understood, and every one of us to work towards that to be achieved.
Thank you, Nikolina. Holly, your perspective is very different because your background is a conservation non-profit. You have that kind of perspective, and it's a completely different point of view. How do you see a change here in how, in your particular area, do you see a change? Is it because of COVID? Is it because this trend of a sustainability trend? Is it because this has been enhanced by the pandemic? How do you see this?
Yeah, thank you, Yolanda. So as Yolanda said, I'm coming at this from a conservation point of view. So a little bit of background. I founded my non-profit How Many Elephants 8 years ago while studying for a master's in sustainable design. And when I started researching the African elephant crisis, I was so horrified and shocked by the poaching statistics of 96 elephants being poached a day for their ivory. I wanted to use my background as a designer to come up with a fresh, design-led awareness-raising campaign. So my now global traveling exhibition showcases 35,000 elephants on a wall to show the annual poaching rate And I've purposely avoided using any gruesome or gory images. My campaign is non-political as well. It just shows the data. And actually, this has proved highly successful and in terms of engagement, seeing this data in a purely visual way. So I also I've partnered and support direct action initiatives on the ground in Africa, and I've partnered with travel businesses and organisations as well. So at the start, when I first founded How Many Elephants, I was under the assumption that cross-sector collaboration between the travel industry and the conservation industry would be well established and commonplace. And even though there's some fantastic travel/conservation initiatives out there, some of whom I've had the pleasure to work with, it's certainly not commonplace. So I believe at the very least, if your business is going to benefit or does benefit from the natural world, then you have a vested interest to protect these natural assets, protect the wildlife, protect the wild spaces, because your business is built on it and relies upon it. So, you know, if there's no natural assets, the wildlife left, there's no tourism and no wildlife-based tourism business. So I've been speaking and exhibiting at travel trade shows for several years, and more often than not, I'm the only conservation NGO at these events, which is absolutely fantastic for me, but in the bigger, broader picture, not so much so. So last week at the IUCN World Conservation Congress in France, they recognised the need to focus on sustainable tourism as a key conservation tool. And I think this is an absolutely huge step forward for encouraging cross-sector collaboration between the travel industry and the conservation industry. So for all businesses out there who utilise and benefit from the natural world, I urge you to partner with nature and look beyond profit and only profit and profit-related performance, and put sustainability and transparency at the very core of your business. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. So now I would like to ask Gregory, who's, I think, joining us from Paris. Is that right, Gregory? Yeah. In
right.
your case, do you see a need to change your value proposition somehow or not? Is sustainability and this post-pandemic era pushing you to change or modify somehow what you're offering to your clients?
Thanks for the question, and I'm happy to indeed speak to you from Paris. What can I say? I'm not sure that the pandemic has changed the end goal of all of this. It's probably something that acts as a catalyst, and that will enable us, as in many sectors, to move faster than what we would have been doing before. It's been the same with home office and home conferencing. The thing that I'm doing with you today works pretty well. So I think it's about acceleration of things that were already somewhere. And I would like to say, because I'm very aligned with Nikolina and Holly about the fact that nature and people are the assets. It is definitely the basis of what should be tourism. And I thought with this question, it's interesting to take a step back and look at what tourism was 70 years ago, when it started to be really something spreading around the globe, when Club Med was created around a simple idea just after World War II, which was reconnecting with oneself and the others with the help of sports and nature. At that time, if you look at this part of our last century, what was tourism and what we were doing? The resorts were extremely simple. We were calling them hut villages at that time. They were built with local materials. They were built by local people. They were spread around large sites where nature was at the center of everything. The staff was mainly local, trained on the spot to open the resort, with international staff also. The staff was part of the experience. They were not only about giving a service, but they were inside of the life of the people there. And the guests, They were not coming for 2 days. They were coming for a month, or they were coming for 2 months. And they were traveling even to Sicily from Paris by train or by boat. So if you look back 70 years ago, we had already some of the keys to what the industry has to trigger as a revolution and what the COVID will accelerate. On our side, what we do is resorts. So we will continue to develop resorts on magnificent places. That's our DNA, but we will continue to emphasize on what has been the DNA and what has to continue be the DNA. So the protection of nature, as we said, is one of the assets. So we have to build as sustainable as possible with certification, and that's our commitment for all our development, so that we integrate certification into our processes. And that means also building more locally, obviously. Of course, it's about reducing the density of what we do so that nature stays the main focus of the experience. And obviously, operationally, you need to ban plastic, you need to reduce food waste. These are things that are expected from the guest, and even much more after the pandemic. Then, local benefits. If we want to have guests, and if we want to have staff, and if we want to protect the nature, we need to push for the local benefits. That's how we demonstrate that tourism is good for everybody. It's about sourcing more locally. And I would really like to invite all the industry players to do something that we have developed with a fantastic organization, which is called AgriSud, where with these people, we organize for our neighbors around our resorts in the world to come back to farming so that we could source locally the products that we will be eating and that the guests will be eating. That's extremely important. Then it's about hiring local teams. But you were right to state that during the pandemics, what we saw was that people, younger generation, were not convinced as much as before about the tourism industry. And it was extremely difficult to hire people for the last few months. So what we need to do now is hire locally, train people, give them hope of something that is better than their current job also, and having them travel. If you open a resort in Africa, why not having people trained from Africa and then operate then a resort in Asia or in Europe or in America? So that's extremely important that you take care of the staff and the staff promotion and the staff career that you can offer. And then obviously open the resorts to the outside culture and the outside nature, but with an organized model so that the tourists are not wandering around with no rules and no organization, but within strict ways of discovering and benefiting the country. And I would say last, about all the revolution or transformation that we need to accelerate, especially in the leisure industry and resorts that we're speaking about, is make stays longer. You have an immediate effect to the duration of a stay. If we manage to double the duration of the stay in a resort for each guest, you will cut by half your carbon footprint. So that's something that requires a modification of the way we entertain the guests so that they can stay longer in the resorts, so they can divide the footprint of travel for the resort. So that's a very large topic that I'm sure we will come back in the session.
Thank you so much. There are some interesting ideas here. I would get back to them afterwards. Frank, in your case, you are also dealing with accommodation, but with a slightly different model. I think with an approach that is local or domestic somehow. Well, not really domestic, but local. That's your approach. Do you see the need to modify your product somehow because of this request for more sustainable products and services, because of these new trends that are emerging? Or do you think you're already in the right track and this is what you're going to keep on doing?
Hi everyone. Well, I got the good news for each of us here, even after COVID, is that our friend COVID has not killed tourism. But, so there is a bright future for tourism, for sure, but this tourism obviously will be different because expectations are different, and those are sustainable expectations and not something which will last only 1 or 2 years. What is it? Many of us this summer have discovered that very close from home, many richness were existing, many opportunities to go and visit, to do some new tourism was existing. So I'm really convinced that there is a bright future for tourism, which is local tourism, which doesn't mean that going away abroad to resort will no longer exist. But for sure, we've gone back to basics, to what is essential. And this is, for the group Pierre Vacances Center Parks, our purpose to say, we are the leader of local tourism in Europe, number one, and we are committed to help each of you to get back to those basics, to what is essential for you in a protected environment. And so what does it mean? It means that, and we've seen that yesterday with our friend from Oliver Wyman, there is still a huge need for experience, obviously. But now those experience needs to be focused, dedicated to what is essential for each of us, which is knowing and protecting nature, the environment, going to discover local culture, local history, and be proactive, be an actor of this history. You no longer want to be passive in this, you want to act positively. 96% of the tourists say, I want to have a positive impact on the territories I'm visiting. So this is exactly what we do at Groupe Pierre Vacances Center Parks, and this is what we've seen this summer. 90% of occupation of our parks and residences, much higher than in 20 and in 19. That's the first big and positive news. And the second one is that in this customer base, 90% of them were domestic. And what they did tell us is, in the end, I did not realize that so close from home were so many great occasions to go and visit locations I had forgotten or I could no longer see. And this is exactly what we want to do, is to create this positive environment where local citizens and customers go along together, discover together, and there is a room for each of them. This is the purpose of tourism. It's about discovering new culture, enrich each other. So this is what we want to do, to propose those immersive experience, and I'm sure that this bright future of tourism really relies on local tourism, because the footprint of it is very, very low. You just drive or go by train 3 hours away from home. You get there with the family and you just have fun and learn at the same time around the environment, good behavior to protect this environment. And this is what our customers ask us. 90% of them are families with kids, teenagers. They want to get back to basics, to get rid of those very dense, crowded, daily environments, and just take time, have fun, and enjoy.
Thank you, Frank. And now Liz, who's joining us from Singapore. Liz, your perspective is very interesting because you represent a large organization with a wide variety of stakeholders in Asia and the Pacific. What have you perceived any emerging trends on the need to modify the value proposition at this time because of the sustainability requests, or not? What's your perspective? Oh, we cannot hear you. You're on mute.
Thank you. Absolutely. What we're seeing is, perhaps there's a lot of silver lining to this big challenge that we faced with the pandemic. Three of the trends in terms of, you asked about adjustment of products and services. The first one I would highlight is the integration of health and wellness into the business model. First, duty of care at every touch point in the journey is being designed in now, and that's critical for the sustained recovery. Consumer interest is also driving the expansion of wellness offerings in hospitality. If you can imagine, there's an expansive list of opportunities in the wellness space between the traditional spa and massage offering and hospital care or health care. The space between those two is great, and the interest is there. In addition, as PATA, we're interested in the model of a very holistic wellness that focuses not just on the individual traveler, but on how the product and service contributes to the community wellness and the broader environment. So this is similar to what my colleagues have commented. Holistic wellness defined as, self, community, and environment, whether it's in the service delivered at that establishment or in the products that are being used. The second, I would agree with Gregory around longer stays. This is another silver lining that is coming out. This is an opportunity for travelers to better appreciate the local culture, the environment, and the peoples. Slower travel that goes deeper than the Instagram photo stops is a more responsible or enriching way to travel. And then lastly, we're intrigued in this region, this concept of integrating travel with living. Circumstances are driving individuals to take longer, more multi-purpose journeys now. Even before COVID, there was an interest in lightening up on your belongings and your home base and having a more global lifestyle. I think the silver nomad in particular is an interesting trend within the global senior segment. So that idea of living in 2 or 3 places, but lighter and freer, and being more accessible to segments that are below the ultra high net worth. So I think those are some interesting outcomes that should, continue after COVID.
Thank you, Liz. I'm gonna now pose the second question, and I'm gonna start with you, because I think your case showcases very well the complexity that we are facing. You have all sorts of members. If they aim to do this new this repositioning strategy, because you're talking about well-being at the center, about perhaps modifying what they are doing right now or including new elements, that requires a new business model, but also a new governance model, because most probably they need to interact among them. They need some legitimacy, a framework, a transparent framework through which they can collaborate. And everything becomes a lot more complex. So how do you think they should face that? What's your perspective at PATA? Are you putting together some tools or elements to make this easier? How do you see this happening?
I agree with your comment. The industry recovery and destination marketing now is more complex than ever, and it will continue to be. So destination marketing now starts with government to government. It's not B2B or B2B2C, as the beginning, because, now is the time that you need to convince other governments that, to trust and relax border policies. And the key decision makers are health ministers. So the challenge for all of us is to learn quickly the right models to reduce risk, deliver stress-free travel experiences within a good economic model and framework that makes it affordable and accessible to travelers. So it's a complex challenge, and no one has the singular answer. And then if you overlay on that, the difference in cultural approaches, we can see here in Asia, even there are segments that are, COVID zero philosophy. And, and then, the cultural aspect overlaid with the science and the politics makes it for very kind of unique decision-making processes in each of the markets. So our goal as PATA is to support our member destinations and enterprises in accelerating that learning process between each other. So I've started a series of government-only member discussions so that we can look at, the learnings and the best practices that are occurring, because none of us has the right silver bullet right now. The one thing that I do know, though, is one foundational area for collaboration and coordination is to address the vaccine equity issue. The top 10 nations have taken up 75% of the vaccines. And in this scenario, no one is safe until everyone is safe. So PATA is supporting the UNICEF COVAX initiative, and we're engaging other members in the travel industry to do the same. And we'll be communicating more on this very soon, but I do see this as very foundational to all of us recovering.
Thank you, Liz. Since you're talking about governments, I'm gonna get back to Nikolina. I think Liz has raised a very interesting question about this G2G communication, government to government collaboration, which is quite new. We have seen that, of course, in the past, but now it takes a different level. You were talking before about the need of making sure that you have the right products and services and that people are ready to offer them in the right way and with capacity building and so on. But I think we are also seeing other things going on. We will probably see more supra-regional products that touch upon different countries. So that requires not only getting organized at the local level among the public and the private sector and within the private sector at all levels with this co-petition, collaboration, competition model, but also the public sector dealing not only local, regionally, and nationally, but also transnationally, which adds further complexity. Are you already seeing that? Are you already working with other governments, but beyond COVID, because COVID obviously was a question that everybody had to face together, but just relating to sustainability and to this new paradigm, because you need to position differently to meet the needs of these new these new needs of the consumers. Is this already happening, or do you feel that this is going to be happening soon?
Thank you, Yolanda, and Liz really touched very important issues as regarding, of course, G2G cooperation and also the role of the health ministers. Just to say, when I was a minister, we set up 9 tourist management regions at the local level. We simply divided our country in tourism regions based on the product that is offered in each region, to be able to gather local authorities, NGOs, and business, and also university representatives, everyone that has a say as regarding a tourism product offer. And in these councils, these local regions, a lot of representatives from the environmental and infrastructure sector were invited, because they all are very important as regarding the sustainability of the tourism product. I'm saying that just to say that now, when COVID started last year in March, I was still a minister, we have created a council where health minister was participating, economy minister was participating, and we were always in touch with the business, because even if we have the G2G conversations, if they are not reflecting what the tourism sector wants, then of course the results are not be the one that will be really helpful. So this coordinational approach is really a must, and in particular from the health ministers, because imagine if there is an order of a health minister to close everything without being in dialogue with the business and without simultaneously offering an economic measures to address the difficulties they face, then this will not have a result and will create a huge turbulence. So this is really important. And simultaneously on top of that, on really B2B conversations with each and every government, starting from the markets that are the most important for each country to recover tourism, and those are, according to me, the ones that have an easy transportation connections, because tourism can't live without the air industry, and we are facing a very big problem of that the airlines are having. So our government last year started with a particular financial support of also tour operators and the airlines giving our 35 euro subsidy per seat. So we in this way try to encourage more airlines to open routes towards Bulgaria as a destination, which could help them. And simultaneously, because tourism sector in Bulgaria is mainly composed by micro and small and medium enterprises, we are trying and we are using the European funds support, being member of the EU, to support those companies to face the challenges that they have with the COVID pandemic consequences. So I'm happy that the current government, the current caretaker government, is also following this approach. And exactly on Friday in Parliament, thanks to all our efforts, actually, we voted additionally 200 million left, which is 100 million euros directly to the tourism industry till the end of the year, to be supported to face the third wave of COVID that is expected in October. So yes, this coordinated approach is crucial, but it has to be in line with what the sector wants. And I will give you also, because I forgot, if I have 1-2 minutes, a very good example. We have started before COVID, and now it's even more required of one of our seaside resorts on the northern part, where the circular economy and the green economy is in place, because this resort is composed of 33 hotels, and they have their local food production that is offered in the services, and the waste from all they use for green energy to be used again in the resort. And they have a training center, so we really try to impose that model to have a sustainable tourism and using also the technologies. This is very important, to have less paper, to have paperless services, because now with the technology and digitalization, this is really happening. But I mean, according to me, technology should be used for the services like this one to facilitate travel, but not to eliminate face-to-face and people-to-people approach, because as I said, tourism is all about people. And everything that we are getting as an experience, including here in Evora, is from the people. So we have to continue that way to have a really sustained tourism product.
Yeah, we are gonna finish this round of questions, and maybe I don't know if we will have time later on to discuss more broadly if this model you are talking about is something you see that's gonna last, or if it's just because of COVID. But let's see first what
it was started just for one sentence. It started before COVID, and now it continues, and many other resorts are trying to imply it. And this ground that was created helps a lot. But it started in 2018.
Fantastic. Thank you. Holly, in your case, do you think what you do or what you're aiming to do requires a different framework? What would be your ideal scenario if you needed to get extra support, or if your ideal world for fostering what you are doing? What would that require?
Thank you, Yolanda, and thank you to World of Travel too for inviting me to be on this panel. So conservation is a broad and complex subject, but today I'm going to use the rise in ecotourism as evidence of the changing attitudes towards conservation. So I'm going to take a look at some of the stakeholders here. So we've got travellers who are more and more motivated to experience nature and authentic scenery and are looking for sustainable options. You then have investors who are demanding businesses take responsibility for their impact on the planet and on humanity. Then there's the local communities who, when they see the benefit of tourism, they then see the value in protecting their natural heritage. And then we have the indigenous people who have a very deep and intimate knowledge of the local biodiversity and how to protect it. So by investing in local communities and indigenous people, and I mean really investing in them, bringing them into the boardroom and partnering with them rather than seeing them as tourist attractions, then they become the best protectors of the wildlife and the wild spaces, and in turn, your tourism business. So I want you to think of NGOs as a broker between the natural assets and your tourism business, because very often the NGOs have deep, long-standing and established relationships on the ground with the local communities, with the indigenous people and with other conservation organisations. And as we all know, when done right, the travel and tourism industry can be a force for very positive impact. So where do you start? It's a minefield knowing which NGO to partner with. So today I'm going to say, come and talk to us at How Many Elephants. We have a very condensed version of the exhibition in the courtyard. And as I said before, we partner with direct action initiatives on the ground in Africa. And we've just launched our global arm, World Female Ranger Day. And we're now chatting and partnering with ranger teams all over the world. So rather than starting from scratch or trying to reinvent the wheel or working in silos, let's really focus on partnering and doing this together in line with the UN SDG number 17, partnerships. So starting here at Evora, let's think local and act global. We need a fully integrated approach to cross-sector collaboration and not seeing conservation as an addition.
Thank you, Holly. Gregory, in your case, do you now feel the need to deeper collaboration with other private sectors? You said that your model is nature-based and that you have to leverage on locals for, in terms of human resources. And you probably need to interact with local firms too. So maybe it's something you have always done since you started, but do you see now a need to have a new framework to do that? Do you need to go to talk to a broader set of stakeholders, and is that more complex? Do you need a new governance model behind that, or do you think that's going to stay as it was before?
That's an extremely interesting question. We, as I said, are based on nature and based on people. And for this, it's always been the case in the past. But again, it's going to have to accelerate for us when we start operating a new place. But when we plan the new place, even when we are at the inception, when we visit a place or when we visit a country to think about what it could become as a touristic destination, this is always, and that's very interesting, something that is done with local national government. When you do plan to do a new touristic destination in a place in Asia or in a place in Africa, that's something that is directly of interest to the national governments, because they know that it has a positive impact. And now they know that it can have an even better impact if it is done the right way. And what I've seen over the past decade, which is extremely interesting, is to see how better trained for these governments around the globe are into knowing that if you want to develop tourism, you don't want to develop certain ways of tourism, but you want to prefer the ones which are the most virtuous. And that's really important and extremely exciting to see that there is a consciousness here in this planet, in the government, but also in the companies for doing something and doing the development better. And I must say that we need this coordination, especially as now the tourism sector has been extremely strongly hit by the crisis. So we all have empty pockets, to be very honest. And when you have an empty pocket, it's very difficult to drive a revolution, especially in the private sector. So the help of government is important into coordination, but it's also important into fostering better development by additional means that they can provide, and also by pushing some things that are the general trends, but that are needed local to get to it. So as I said, longer stays is something on which we all have to work together. Governments, operators, and all types of operators. If you want to have someone stay 2 months in a place because he will work from the distance, but also have his kids study from the distance, for instance, it will require so many different interactions and so many different stakeholders that it deserves a very strong coordination. So we all have a stake. We all have a part to play in the change of the new world of tourism. So I believe that's one of the great benefits of this conference, for which I was very honored to be invited. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now we don't have much time left, I think, 1 minute. So Frank, same question to you, if you can be very short. I mean, does this require this new scenario requires a new model or not for you to do that easier?
Yeah, the answer is definitely yes. It's been perfectly said by my dear fellows. Probably we all know that in the past, something we did not do perfectly well is operating and pushing a tourism which was against local citizens. And this tourism being isolated can no longer exist. It needs to be backed, supported, really, and the words of partnership with the different stakeholders are really key. So it does imply many things in the development phase and in the operation phase. So we need also to change the way we used to do that before. And Gregory has it perfectly right. In the development phase, and we've got an example of the next center parks will be opening next year between Bordeaux and Toulouse. It took us more than 10 years to discuss with local politicians, NGOs, people in charge of the employment to say, where should we locate this new park? How should it be built? Do we commit, and we did commit, to take 80% of the workforce locally, 80% of the raw materials being bought, sourced locally? So that's a big change for us. But that's the price to pay, and that's the right way to really implement a new park. And then, operating this park, where do you source your workforce? Where do you buy your food and beverage? That's the same. We did commit to buy 3/4 of it locally, meaning that for those knowing the French geography, between Bordeaux and Toulouse, you will not find much fish at your table, but we assume that, and that's perfect to say you are here and you're not along the seaside. So that's a big change for us to assume that it must be pushed and in favor of the local environment. This tourism, 8% of our GDP, is for them, is for local and not against local.
Thank you so much. So I don't know if you agree, but I think the main conclusion here is that, yes, the industry needs to be reorganized. It's not very clear how, for what I'm seeing. And I think one of perhaps the suggestions we could do is that you all see this need, but some sort of a framework needs to put together to answer these questions we have posed here today. And maybe it could be an action that could happen after this interesting forum to foster some sort of action or pilot project through which we could try to find these answers beyond mere theory. But yes, reorganization needs to happen, and if that happens, that's going to be a revolution. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions.